Welcome to the Joy Meets Pain podcast. I'm your host, Dorcas. As a psychotherapist who has worked with children, couples, individuals, and families for decades, I cannot tell you how many times I've heard people say, my family is the worst, or I'm too embarrassed to talk about my family, or no family is like mine. Well, guess what, listeners? All families have ishness, foolishness, happiness, shadiness, loneliness, forgiveness, hopefulness, goodness, and the list goes on. If you come from a family and are trying to navigate your family relationships, then welcome. Please keep in mind, I am not providing therapy or medical advice. And here's a heads up. Once in a while, I will curse. So if you're looking for a clean, no foul language kind of show, this is not it.
Hello, everyone. It's Taffy. Welcome to the Joy Meets Pain podcast. This is my very first solo episode. And I will be sharing my thoughts on an interesting topic, and that is how we describe ourselves when asked. Because I think this is something that this is a question that we're often faced with. And most of us don't ever really seem to have a solid answer, or it's something that when you're on the spot, you kind of freeze and you don't know what to say. And so when someone asks you, so tell me about yourself, what do you say? Do you go straight to your job or your passions? Do you maybe go straight to talking about your family? Or do you just, say whatever comes to your mind? I remember when I was asked recently, well, not recently, a couple of months ago, in a room full of people at an event, and someone said, "Oh, we're gonna go around in a circle, and everybody has to say something about themselves as we get to know each other, icebreaker." And my go-to was where I come from, because I live in a different country to the country that I was born and grew up in. And so I started with where I come from and which city I live in and how long I've lived in the country and the city. And then I went to my job, and this was sort of like a a weird thing to talk about, just because I was in the middle of like transition. I was transitioning from one job to the next, and I would have been doing something completely different to what I've been doing before. But, I feel like, as many of us also feel, i- it is expected or it is assumed that you will at some point talk about what you do for work. And then I mentioned, I think, one of my passions. And yeah, but like you always kind of, once you're done, you kind of sit there and you think, oh, okay, did that cut it? Like, Um, yeah, so first we're going to tackle why this question matters. Why does it matter being able to describe yourself? And I would say self description reveals what we prioritize. So that could be work, relationships, achievements, personality, faith, or culture. And the answer often depends on context, right? So think job interview versus maybe a family gathering, or getting to know a new person. It could be a friend, a new friend, or it could be a date. And I think that identity is fluid. We change how we see ourselves over time. It depends what season you're going through. Um, and so I think that is something that is important to take note of, that it's something that's very it changes, you know. And some of the common defaults that people tend to go for are career or studies. So, for example, I'm an engineer or I study law. The second one is relationships or roles. So, I'm a mom, I'm a sister, or a wife. I feel like I see that one a lot on social media, like especially the being a mom and being a wife. Um, some people tend to focus on personality traits. So, for example, I'm outgoing, I'm quiet or introverted, or I'm an extrovert. I'm a social butterfly, you know. Um, and I do wonder if these actually capture the whole person. I'm gonna go with no, because I think as humans, we are very layered, very nuanced, very multifaceted, and you're not just one thing. And even if we go through all of these titles, you can be a mom and a sister, you can be a wife, and at the same time, you can be a, a doctor or an engineer. And at the same time, you can be someone that's outgoing or someone that is introverted. And so going back again to the point I made earlier, that um, it changes, like how we see ourselves and our identity changes over time. It depends on the context. Is it an interview? Is it a family gathering? Is it a relaxed social event? And But at the end of the day, it reveals what we prioritize, what we think is important, what we think is important for other people to know about us. And so, beyond labels, right? When we think about beyond labels, what happens when we describe ourselves with values instead of roles? I will give an example. For example, tell us about yourself. Someone could say, I'm curious. I'm someone that, loves creating, or I'm deeply loyal. And yeah, that, as opposed to focusing on achievements or the roles you play in other people's lives or how you make your money. I think quite recently, I'm trying to remember where I saw this, but um someone was talking about how it might be okay. So I live in Germany, and I think we were talking about, or I was trying to research, um living in Cologne, where I stay, versus living in Berlin. And so I was doing a little research on, Cologne versus Berlin. And, a thing that came up actually was the fact that people in Berlin, it is considered impolite or rude to ask someone what they do for work. So when you're getting to know someone and someone says, "Oh, tell me about yourself," nobody cares what you do for work. And people actually don't like to be asked that question. So that was pretty interesting. And I think that's a good thing. I think it is a good thing to move away from um wanting to sort of like pigeonhole people, and allowing people maybe to exist and be outside of the value that they they bring, or how they make their money, or we are so much more than those things. Anyway, um yeah. And this goes also into maybe cultural differences. So in some places, like, the difference between people in Berlin and people in Cologne or maybe other parts of Germany is, sometimes self-description can be tied to personal values or community. And maybe in other places, it's more individualistic. Um, and yeah. So when I think about how I would describe myself today versus, let's say, 5 to 10 years ago, hmm, I would, I would say, um, I love creating. I love making things. I am curious and I am passionate about well being across the board, be it mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, well being. I am someone that's loyal. And so I think, yeah, I would move more towards value based and less role based ways of describing myself. And I think I actually need to sit down and come up with like a solid one that I can easily access in my brain for the next time that I'm asked this question. And now we are going to look at a challenging aspect of identity, and this is identity versus expectations. And so, how society and family sometimes expects us to describe ourselves in certain ways, or expect us to present in certain ways, and how that can sometimes be in conflict with, who we want to be, how we want to show up, you know? Um, and also the pressure of living up to a title or a role, right? And when I think about this on a personal level, so I'm somebody based on my curious, multi-passionate nature, I have lived many lives. Um, so I studied graphic design and am an artist since I was a child. And so I channeled that into graphic design. And then at some point, I was very, very into and very curious about fitness and wellness. And so I then went on to um, acquire qualifications in fitness and wellness coaching. And when I look at those two roles, especially the creative role, I found it and still find it really like suffocating and overwhelming. Like when I try to live up to this, like, oh, I'm a creative and I'm an artist, or because then it's just so much pressure. And I found that, or I find that every time I look at myself through that lens of an artist or a creative, it it almost sort of constricts my ability to actually execute the thing, because it's just too much pressure, too much pressure. And so, as you might have noticed, when I was giving it a shot trying to describe myself, well, the way that I describe myself now, I said I love creating. I didn't say I'm an artist. I didn't say I'm a creative. So I love creating seems more authentic to me, because there's just there that it takes away like the pressure of living up to a title that has already sort of existed before I was born, or before I decided to take that, that path in life. And so, yeah, that's something I just wanted to point out, that, sometimes these titles and these roles actually apply way too much pressure on us, such that we end up not actually experiencing or living or being that thing to the fullest, because it's almost like in a like a yeah, like a sort of a kind of imposter syndrome kind of thing. And so, yeah, and moving on to how do you reclaim your how does one reclaim their self-description? How do you define yourselves on your own terms, taking into account, you know, the different seasons that life brings, um, the the values that you have, or the roles that you play in your life? How do you reclaim self-description? If you stripped away your job title, your family roles, or what you can do for others, if you stripped away your achievements, how would you describe yourself? And so that is a question for you, our audience. How would you describe yourself if we stripped away titles and roles and achievements? Um, and I'd love to hear from you. How do you describe yourself when you are asked? How have you described yourself in the past? Is this how you would like to continue to describe yourself? Are there maybe ways, or are there things you want to maybe do away with? Do you prefer um, a combination of role based versus value based? Are you more just value based? Are you more just role based? I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on the topic. DM us on Instagram or leave a comment under the podcast. And yeah. And so with that, I say thank you so much for letting me share my first solo episode or moment with you guys. And until next time, bye.
You found it meaningful in some way and have comments to share, or you would like to share your family story, whether joyful or painful, please send an email to info@joymeetspain.com. Thank you for tuning in and for allowing me to spend this part of your day with you. Please like, rate, and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. And of course, please spread the word. Till next time, stay well and stay present.